Foresight for policy design and implementation. Based on a few exercises we have undertaken with ministries, we have put here some views of what these members think foresight is. We always ask these questions at the beginning of trainings to have an understanding of the audience. This is just a sample of responses we get. Foresight is seen as methodological framework to plan and shape models of and pathways to the future, considering uncertainty, or a sequence of methods to develop a vision of the future as well as a strategy and system for implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, or a method to better understand and implement manners to increase performance and competitivity, or a way, such as roadmap, to integrate the country within the EU or the European Research Area, for example, or a way to establish evidence-based and creative practices in policy development to produce commitment and ownership, or it's about to look ahead beyond usual timescales and across disciplines, or a tool aimed at improving policy planning to support decision makers to identify future directions in the medium to long term. However, we see foresight with three basic aspects. It's about debating the future, analyzing the future, and shaping the future. These three activities are done in a participatory way, being inclusive, so it's involving all relevant stakeholders in trying to reach a joint systemic understanding of the current situation and how it can evolve into the future. It's also open, meaning we're looking at alternative futures and not to try to predict the future. And we're looking medium to long term in a systematic and creative process to enable participants to jointly see what is possible, probable, and preferred. And it's also action-oriented, meaning we're trying to shape the future today. It's a vision-building process aiming at present-day decisions and to mobilize joint actions. What are the building blocks of foresight? The first aspect is that we're trying to involve all relevant stakeholders. Who are stakeholders? It will depend on the context, but it usually could be researchers, company managers, unions, consumers, NGOs, associations, policymakers, overall citizens. When we are analyzing, debating, and shaping the future, we are looking at where are we now? Where do we want to go? How things may develop, how can we prepare to go to where we want to go, so how to get to this possible future within different alternatives, and in a structured way, meaning methods come to structure the debate. So here we have a few examples such as panels, scenarios, roadmaps, surveys. When is foresight applied for policy support? Typical examples are challenges faced by territories, regions, countries, cities, etc., such as decline of key industrial sector, relocation, accession to the EU, coastal flooding. Also decisions that need to be backed up by stakeholders to be successful, such as priority setting for research, innovation, regional development. Decisions with deep or long-term impact, such as on infrastructure, transport, healthcare, reorganization, or when there is a need to prepare for emerging phenomena with disruptive potential and high uncertainty, such as climate change, knowledge society, globalization, demographic change, immigration, nanotechnology, hydrogen society, or when there is a need for enhancement of innovation capability. How does foresight feed into policy design and implementation? When we look at the policy making cycle of agenda setting, policy definition, policy implementation, evaluation, and the learning process, Foresight can feed into the agenda setting process, such as with visions, with understanding of possible changes. In the policy definition stage, it can support with policy options, with new ideas. In the policy implementation phase, it can support by bringing about new policy configurations, enhancing the responsiveness of the system. And throughout these three main stages, Foresight can bring about legitimacy and transparency. What are the usual rationales and benefits of Foresight? We're going to talk now about a structured stakeholder dialogue on the future when we talk about Foresight. Foresight can produce insights about the future, such as dynamics of change, new perspectives, future risks and opportunities, strategic options, system capabilities, stakeholders' views. Foresight can change relations with respect to the future, such as new networks, new linkages, building common ground, building shared perspectives, or shaping joint visions. And Foresight can also change attitudes towards the future, such as embedding long-term thinking, building awareness of challenges, and building a foresight and learning culture. And all this with a higher goal of being prepared for the future. What can be foresight impacts? With regards insights about the future, Foresight produces strategic intelligence as a better base for decisions and strategies. With respect to change in relations or attitudes, Foresight can impact with changes in society for better policy implementation or changes in policy process for better decision making. For example, when we're talking about strategic intelligence as a base for better decision and strategy, we're talking about an impact we call informing policy making. This is about when decisions taken by key actors in the commissioning body are more aware of long-term developments and how these are liable to interact with current policy decisions. When we're talking about changes in society for better policy implementation, we're talking about actually two possible impacts. The first being the building of new networks. So it's about bringing together people from different sectors and institutions involved with shaping the future of a particular topic to collectively understand the challenges and opportunities that they are liable to confront, and the strategies and objectives that others might pursue. Again, with regards to changing society for policy implementation, a third possible impact of foresight is about developing capabilities and foresight culture. And this is about enabling people with a variety of backgrounds to define and embark upon their own foresight activities and to create their own foresight networks. And finally, with regards to changing policy process for better decision making, it's about devising strategic visions, thus creating a shared sense of commitment to these visions among foresight participants and an agreed direction to follow. What are the policy functions of foresight? The first is informing policy, which is about generating insights regarding the dynamics of change, future challenges and options, along with new ideas, and transmitting them to policymakers as an input to policy conceptualization and design. The second function would be facilitating policy implementation, and this is about enhancing the capacity of for change within a given policy field by building a common awareness of the current situation and future challenges, as well as new networks and visions amongst stakeholders. The third function is embedding participation in policymaking, which is about facilitating the participation of civil society in the policymaking process, thereby improving its transparency and legitimacy. The fourth function is supporting policy definition, which is about jointly translating outcomes from the collective process into specific options for policy design and implementation. Finally, the fifth function is about reconfiguring the policy system. So new configurations of or linkages between policy-making bodies in a way that the system becomes apt to address long-term challenges. So when we are talking about foresight, what does it look at? So looking at the structured dialogue on the future, we have three main phases. The first being the diagnosis, so it's about understanding where we are. So it's about the current situation and how the situation, what are the systems involved and how they interrelate to one another. The second is about prognosis, so it's exploring what could happen, how the system we're looking at might evolve and what would be the impacts on the interconnected systems. And the third is prescription. It's where we will debate what we would like to happen and decide what should be done to get where we want to get into the long term. So what are the main characteristics we have to take into account? What are the basic types of dialogue in a foresight exercise? Each type of dialogue, be it diagnosis, prognosis, or prescription, calls for specific objectives. So we need to understand what are the guiding questions in each of these phases. It also calls for specific participants in the dialogue. So we have to understand what participants, what stakeholders will be involved in each of these phases and what will be the level of participation. Is it a more open phase? Is it a more closed phase? And also we will need to understand what methods can structure the debate depending on the questions we're asking and the participants we want to get involved. So we need to tailor the approach to objectives and intended impacts in each of these three phases. So this is the basics when we design a foresight exercise.